Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. The federal government is going to spend another $650 million to help First Nations communities pay for supplies, medical care, and services to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. That's in addition to $305 million previously announced. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller says the threat of a second wave of COVID-19 is very real, and Indigenous communities will be just as vulnerable to it as they were to the first outbreak. Saskatchewan's opposition NDP is calling on the government to release the Provincial Health Authority's report on long-term care. The 2019 report has yet to be released publicly, the same way it has been for previous years. The Premier says many of the people working on the report have been preoccupied with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it will be released very shortly. Recent reports in Ontario highlighted the disturbing shortcomings at 5 long-term care homes in the province, including abuse and infestations. Ottawa is extending its ban on cruise ships entering Canadian waters until October 31st. Transportation Minister Marc Garneau says the ban applies to passenger ships with overnight accommodations of more than 100 passengers. Last year, 140 cruise ships brought more than 2 million visitors to Canadian ports and Garneau. The government is looking at what to do about the economic impact the ban will have on the tourism industry. Infectious disease experts advise against giving someone outside your household a ride in your car during the COVID-19 pandemic. University of Calgary researcher Craig Jenny says that it's hard to maintain a safe 2-meter distance when you're in a vehicle. He notes that face masks worn by both the driver and the passenger can help minimize risk if you decide to travel in a car with others, but they don't offer complete protection. The Supreme Court of Canada handed down 2 rulings this morning on police entrapment. The justices ruled that an unsubstantiated tip that someone is dealing drugs from a phone number doesn't amount to reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. The court says police must take sufficient steps to verify the tips to avoid entrapping suspects, and has upheld one man's conviction and reinstated the stay of proceedings for another. The Canadian National Railway Corporation says revenue fell 15% year over year in April and 21% in May due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking at an online conference, CEO JJ Ruest says auto volumes have dropped more than 90% year over year. Mr. Ruest says early earnings from crude by rail are as bad as can be amid a global decline in oil and the pandemic, both of which have sent oil prices to near record lows over the past 2 months. However, he says grain revenues will likely hit new monthly highs in May, June, and July, following a backlog owing to a late wet crop last year. The Alberta government wants to change the rules on charter schools and homeschooling. The proposed Choice in Education Act would allow a group seeking to establish a new charter school to bypass the local school board and apply directly to the government. Premier Jason Kenney says the bill emphasizes that parental choice is the foundation of education. The bill would also allow unsupervised, unfunded homeschooling. Minneapolis is bracing for more violence after days of civil unrest, with burnt buildings, looted stores, and graffiti messages demanding justice. Protesters torched a local police station at the heart of a controversial death in police custody. George Floyd, a black man, died on Monday while being arrested as a white police officer kneeled on his neck for nearly 8 minutes. The police officer and 4 others worked at the precinct that was burnt before being fired earlier this week. The White House has reposted President Donald Trump's tweet that, quote, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts," on its official Twitter account. That's after Twitter added a warning to the original tweet about the ongoing violent protests in Minneapolis, saying that it violated rules about glorifying violence. President Trump is threatening to take action to bring the city under control and is calling protesters outraged by the death of a black man in police custody thugs. Iran says its experts will continue their nuclear development activities despite sanctions imposed on their fellow scientists by the U.S. earlier this week. State TV quoted a statement from the country's nuclear department this morning saying the U.S. decision to impose sanctions on 2 Iranian nuclear scientists indicates the continuation of a hostile attitude. It says the sanctions would make them determined to continue their nonstop efforts more than before. Dozens of people protested in Hong Kong following a vote by China's ceremonial parliament to approve legislation that could severely restrict opposition political activity and civic activity in the Asian Financial Center. The protesters chanted slogans in the high-end Central District, and some draped banners over their balconies with sayings such as "Independence for Hong Kong." Final details of the law are not yet known, but China says it will prohibit separatist activities and actions that might threaten the Communist Party's monopoly on political power in mainland China. Pakistani officials say an invasion of locusts is spreading across the country, damaging crops and posing a threat to food security. The locusts have come at a time when the country is also struggling to tackle the spread of the coronavirus, which has caused more than 1,300 deaths and infected more than 16,000. Originating in Africa, the desert locusts have spread across Pakistan, forcing authorities to dispatch aircraft and spraying machines filled with pesticides mounted on vehicles to eliminate the insects, which fly together by the millions. SpaceX and NASA will try again tomorrow to get humans to space from U.S. soil for the first time in nearly a decade. It is the second attempt following Wednesday's weather-scrubbed launch just before liftoff. Former astronaut Katie Coleman says it will be tough for the latest crew to get excited all over again, but when they feel the rockets rumble, the excitement should return. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.